seed plants that do red meat and poultry, same root. So, so you got to keep everything separate. And if I'm selling commodities, like let's say I'm selling carrots or cabbage or corn, tomatoes, anything like that from the farm, I'm selling that commodity, and sales tax may not be an issue. If I'm selling cattle, you're buying a steer from me, then sales tax may not be an issue. But if I'm selling food, and once that animal becomes food products, I'm selling food, then all of a sudden sales tax comes into play. And that's very important. Now, let's say if I didn't want to do just on-farm sales of meat by the cut. Let's say I wanted to sell my meat to restaurants or other institutions. I wanted to hook up with a wholesaler so they could move the product through a bunch of other store chains for me. Then I've got to be thinking about the right side of this slide, and that's the food service or non-retail sales. I'm not selling directly to the end consumer. I'm selling to an intermediary. I still have to go through inspection. Can't be custom exempt processed. It's got to come through a USDA inspected plant for all the slaughter, carcass breakdown, and packaging. I have to have all my labels. They have to be USDA approved in format. And if I'm not doing the slaughter, but I am transporting that product, I'm taking possession of it before it goes to a warehouse or before it goes to the restaurants, then all of a sudden I've got a USDA form I have to fill out to be a meat handler. And I have to have all these protocols and documentation in place about how I've stored the meat, how I've handled the meat, my pest control program, my food safety and security program, issues related to packaging and any claims made on the packaging. I have to have a recall system in place and documentation that shows it's in place. And in food industry, everything is write it down. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So you have to have a record keeping system for all of that. And I'm subject to inspection by USDA. And of course, I'm still having to deal with sales tax. I do have to collect and remit sales tax. So what about poultry? I mean, everything we've talked about up to this point is really related to red meat. Well, Tennessee doesn't have an inspection program for poultry. There is a Meat and Poultry Inspection Act, and it basically says, look at the Federal Poultry Products Inspection Act. So in fact, if you go to TDA's website to look it up, it's going to dump you out to a USDA FSIS document that gives you all the details you need to know. And one of the things it says in that document is, yes, there are some exemptions for people who raise poultry and want to slaughter and sell the meat instead of a live bird. But to qualify for any one of the poultry exemptions that we're going to talk about in a minute, a business must slaughter poultry or process poultry products under sanitary conditions using procedures that produce sound, clean poultry products fit for human food. So some things to consider there. If I'm raising chickens and I want to slaughter chickens for my own personal use, and as a youngster, that's something my family did. There's no limits. I can do whatever I want. They're my birds. I'm going to eat them. I'm going to raise them, kill them, and eat them all on my premises. So there's no limits. There's no issues there at all. Now, I can, much in the same way that I would sell a live steer, hog, lamb, or goat to a buyer and then drop it off the packing plant and have it processed. In poultry, I can sell the live birds to a customer and custom slaughter those birds on the premises. Rather than go to a facility, I can do it myself under some certain conditions, certain exemptions. If we're talking about good poultry, not ones that are sick or something's wrong with them, if the poultry are healthy, fit for human food consumption, and if I do it in a sanitary standard or following sanitary practices, I can do that. So you could come to my farm and say, you know what, I want to buy 5 birds from you. And I'd really like to have them processed. And I can say, okay, well, I'll do that. It's this much per bird. And instead of you taking a live bird home, let me go behind the barn here and I'll come back out in 15 minutes with a dressed bird for you. I can do that. Now, I cannot sell or donate that custom slaughtered poultry to anybody else. Or say, I can't go buy them from you at your farm, custom slaughtered, and then me, as the buyer of those birds, turn around and sell them to a restaurant or something. I cannot do that under the exemptions, but there are some opportunities here. one of the biggest things to remember is the 1,000 limit exemption. And basically it's saying if you raise a bunch of chickens and you want to slaughter 1,000 of them, people come to your farm, buy the birds, but what they're taking home is a dead dressed bird and not a live animal, then you can do that up to 1,000 birds, and it's pretty much okay. Nobody's going to come check you out if you do that. So a person may slaughter and process on his or her premises poultry that he or she raised, and they may distribute such poultry without mandatory inspection if you're not doing more than 1,000 birds per year that way for human food purposes. You are not buying or selling products other than those produced from your poultry on your farm. In other words, I can't go to my neighbor when I'm running low on chickens, go to my neighbor, buy a bunch of their chickens, bring them back to my farm for the purposes of slaughter, or slaughter them on their farm, but bring back and sell the birds to you from my farm. Can't do that. Sanitary standards and conditions apply. I have to keep records to show that I didn't sell more than 1,000 birds a year this way. And I can sell directly to the person that's going to consume the bird, but I can't sell to somebody else that's going to serve it in a restaurant or anything like that. That's the 1,000 bird exemption. It's direct to consumer sales only, nothing else. Now there are exemptions for 20,000 birds. It's a little different. In fact, you can actually have your own facility where you process the birds. And what this is saying is, USDA is saying we're not going to require that you have an inspector on site watching bird by bird slaughter. If you follow these rules, you cannot do more than 20,000 of your birds. Once again, can't go to the neighbor's house, neighbor's farm and buy a bunch of their birds. And I cannot slaughter their birds for them in my facility. It doesn't work that way. It can be only my birds. The only meat coming out, the poultry coming out has to be things that I prepare. I can't go buy bulk products from Costco, Sam's, or somewhere like that, do some further processing or chop them up myself and sell them that way. I can't even be an intermediary, buying whole carcasses in bulk and then turn around and sell them to you. Cannot do that. I can only distribute them myself. I can't turn it over to somebody else to do it for me or contract with somebody. I can only do it within the state of Tennessee. The poultry have to be healthy when they're slaughtered. All that activity has to take place on my premises. And once again, only products that I handle. No other growers' birds go through my facility, and I have specific labeling requirements. I can even refrigerate or freeze these birds in a package, but I have to label it with my name and address, and I have to point out that this is done in an exempt facility. So nobody's going to confuse this with USDA inspected poultry slaughter and processing. So there is that limit, and they are very strict about the rules. So if you say, I want to be one of these folks, I want to have my own little facility, I want to slaughter up to 20,000 birds a year for sale and distribution, expect USDA to say, we want to see your record books. Prove to us that you're not doing more than 20,000 birds, and prove to us that all those birds are your birds. If you're saying you grew 10,000 a year, but you slaughtered 20, and there's going to be a problem. And USDA is going to come down hard on you for that type of thing. There are some other exemptions. There is PGOP exemption, producer, grower, or other person. So it's like the 20,000 bird exemption. You can be a single business entity, and I can sell these to consumers, restaurants, hotels, boarding houses, even for the preparation of meals that they're going to do. And I can even be an individual who's not a grower, but who purchases live poultry from a grower. Then I do all the slaughter and processing for sale to any of these establishments listed above. I can do that. I don't even have to be the grower, but I can slaughter and process the birds. But I'm still limited on where I can sell, and I cannot sell through a retail store. Retail store probably wouldn't want to handle it anyway if it didn't come from an inspected source with a verified food safety program and food product liability insurance, which we'll mention in a minute. There is a small enterprise exemption as well. That process is limited to the slaughtering, dressing, or cutting up of the carcass. It could be my birds, it could be purchased birds, but it's still limited to in-state distribution. And I can purchase inspected birds. I can buy a whole carcass that came from a big USDA inspected slaughter plant, and I can cut it up and I can even sell to retail stores, but I can't sell to any other operation that is operating under an exemption. So, for example, earlier we we're talking about red meat facilities. If I'm a rancher and I want to sell meat by the cut on my farm, I can have a USDA plant slaughter the animal and package it up for me by the cut, and I can sell it from the farm if I have a retail exempt permit to do so. But I cannot be retail exempt selling products that are inspection exempt slaughter. So I can, that's why this is in there. It says you can sell to retail stores, but I cannot sell to anybody that's retail exempt, because that meat is supposed to come from inspected slaughter, and I'm wanting to operate as an exempt from inspection slaughter. Okay. Now, we mentioned sales taxes before. This is something I like to mention to everyone that wants to do a value-added food product. Even under cottage food industry laws, it's very important to be aware that once you get beyond selling a generic ag commodity, and I'm selling a food product, and meat and poultry products are food products, sales taxes, or if you're not collecting sales taxes, use taxes, that applies everywhere. Livestock, those are commodities. Meat and poultry products, those are considered food and food ingredients. So there's a state sales tax that should be collected and remitted for every dollar of sales of those products. And even if you go the next step and do prepared food items, then there's a state sales tax for those as well, plus possibility for local sales tax rates. And as with any other food or ag product, all those local meat sales, that's taxable income. You don't get to pocket the cash. It's supposed to be disclosed on federal tax forms. So the IRS wants their cut of your business too. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people think of this as, I'm selling just another ag commodity. Nope, you're selling meat and poultry, and meat and poultry are food, and food is not the generic ag commodity. It is, and by definition, it is a processed food product. It might be minimally processed, but it's still a processed food product. Now, if you're going to sell these products, and especially if I'm going to sell this to a retail establishment, if I'm going to sell it to a restaurant, if I'm going to sell it to a farmer's market, product liability insurance becomes a big deal. And insurance policies are just a necessary evil. Depending on where you want to sell it, laws may require it. If you want to operate as your own business and you're borrowing money from the bank to get the business up and going, the bank may require it. Organizations such as the farmers markets themselves, or the retail food store, or the wholesaler, they may require it as well. And it's a good risk management tool, because the truth of the matter is, life's a gamble, so is business. You never know what's going to happen. You know, I've studied economics. I have a PhD in economics. We can talk all day about Engel's law, Schwab's law, Wright's law, but the most commonly observed law in economics is Murphy's law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And in the food business, you see that quite often. No matter how well you plan and everything you try to do is right to prevent a food safety issue, if something goes wrong and somebody gets sick because, or heaven forbid, somebody dies because they had a bad food product, they're going to turn around and sue you. And that's a big concern. So, and there's a big difference between having just coverage and effective coverage as well. Now, when it comes to product liability insurance, especially for food product liability insurance, it's hard to understand. And, you know, one thing I did learn about getting a PhD in economics, the answer to every question about an economic scenario is it depends. Those two words work every time, because it does. There's so many factors that come into play. And food product liability insurance, I can't say it costs exactly this much. This is exactly how they determine what your insurance premium is going to be. It's a challenge. It's very hard to understand. Now, a lot of people who want to sell in a short supply chain, they want to be local food suppliers. They want to sell at the farm or through the farmer's market, think they may already be covered through their general farm liability insurance policy. Truth of the matter is, once I'm selling a food product, I'm really not. You're not covered by that policy. A G-FLIP, or general farm liability insurance policy, protects against claims for bodily injury and property damage on the farm or ranch, or resulting from farm or ranch operations. However, if I'm buying food products like meat and poultry and I'm taking them home and cooking them and I get sick because I ate it at home, that's where I got sick, then that's not really covered. G-flips cover accidents that affect farmers and ranchers, their employees. It's not a replacement for workers' comp or anything like that, and for guests and customers on the farm or ranch. But the food products are generally consumed off the farm or ranch, and they're considered a processed food, not an ag commodity. So it's different. It's selling meat is very different than selling fruits and vegetables that just were just picked, or even from a U-pick operation on your farm. You may need a commercial business liability insurance policy. It kind of works like a G-flip, but the difference is if you're involved in activities that are not considered agriculture or farming, and once again, we get into meat processing and meat marketing, it's not ag and farming anymore. So if you go down that road, you may want to consider just being a commercial business. In fact, I would recommend your meat business be set up as a separate legal entity from your farm or ranch, because the liability issues are pretty big. There's a lot better chance somebody would get sick from a meat or poultry product than it is that somebody's going to be injured by the live animal that is happily grazing on your farm. So keep that in mind. So what makes a food product liability insurance policy different? Well, G-flip doesn't protect against any claims of contamination or foodborne illness, but food product liability insurance does. An FPLI protects against consumer injury claims, and depending on what you build into your policy, it can cover the legal fees. And like I said, it depends. You can find it's like buying a car. There may be 1,000 different options. So getting a food product liability insurance policy, you got a bunch of different options. How much comfort or how much protection do you want? And each one of those things is an option that has its own price that comes with it. That makes the coverage cost really hard to determine because there are no standard premiums for coverage. It's an extremely competitive industry, but everyone operates in a different way. One thing about cars, if you're going out buying a pickup, let's just say it's a Chevy Silverado. So you're going to go buy a Chevy Silverado. There 85-90% of every truck is the same. There's only a few differences, and even those are very well known. Well, in the food industry, and especially the meat industry, everybody operates in a different parameter. Where I'm selling, what I'm selling, how I'm selling it, where it was processed. A lot of combination of factors that come into play. It makes it very difficult for you to really figure out what that may be. And here's just an example. And this is an oversimplified example. And I use fruit pies because it's a cooked product with very low risk. So if I wanted to have $1 million food product liability insurance policy, and I made fruit pies, and this million policy was broken up basically third, medical, pain, suffering, and punitive. Some actuarialist somewhere has figured out that the likelihood of someone getting sick from eating a fried fruit pie is 1 in 10,000 pies. So I've got $1 million policy times the chance of 1 in 10,000 that something happens to somebody. So my premium's about $100. That is a very, very simplified example. And obviously there's a lot more factors that come into play when we start talking about meat and poultry products. Just the different combinations of products that you sell, that could have a big impact on as well. Cattle are cattle, and you sell them by the head. Beef is any one of a combination from 200 possible products that come from that one head. So, a lot of different things have an impact there. So are you required to have a food product liability insurance policy? Hey, here comes the perfect answer. It depends. If I wanted to sell inspected products through a supermarket chain, or if I wanted to get into affiliated foods, associated wholesale grocers, maybe a wholesaler for restaurants, then yeah, I'm going to have it. If I go through any of those big establishments, they don't want to take on your risk. So they require that you have the coverage, because if something goes wrong, somebody buys something at the grocery store and it makes them sick, the store is going to get sued. And they're going to turn around and say, this is your product, it's your fault. We're going to tell the customer that got sick, it's really their fault, sue them. Or they're going to say, this was your fault that we got sued, so we're going to sue you. So they require these things. Restaurants, more than likely, not every restaurant operates the same way. Some small local independent operations, they may say, sure, I'll take your product, and I'm not going to ask much in return. I'm not going to put a lot of strings on the purchase. But most of them are going to require something to show that you have some sort of liability coverage, just in case there's a contaminated product or a foodborne illness issue. Farm to school, we have a lot of people that try to push product through farm to school. I'm going to say probably on this one. There is no insurance requirements at the federal level for anyone selling to school meal programs. Now in Tennessee, the type and amount really depends on what is being sold and who's doing the buying. So there are some where you actually find some forms online for not year-round, short-term purchases of products by the school from local suppliers, and it includes meat and poultry. And one of the questions on there is, what kind and how much of food product liability insurance do you have? So it's probably going to be required. But if I want to go through the, if I'm selling to a school, and a lot of schools, they have a primary vendor, and it may be someone like Cisco, Benny Keith, US Foods. That may be their primary supplier. And rather than say you deliver the product directly to the school, they'll say you deliver it to their warehouse, because they'll bring a truck with everything we ordered, including your stuff, to the school. So if I want to go through that warehouse, then they're probably going to require that liability insurance. So farmers markets, more and more over the last decade, we've seen a huge growth in the number of farmers markets. And I don't know that every farmers market in Tennessee requires it, but some of the bigger ones do require some product liability insurance, $1 million policy in many cases. So you're probably going to have some kind of food product liability insurance if you're selling meat and poultry, because once again, those are not ag commodities, those are food products. So some of the things we see with farmers markets, and farmers markets are not all the same. Each farmers market has their own set of requirements. In my state and some of the other states that border Oklahoma, I've seen this a lot. You see farmers markets, some of them say, we don't want that. We don't want meat and poultry because we don't want the liability. Or you may have others that say, we have a limit on how many of those we take, because we don't want to have so many that everybody's competing against one another, and it's cutthroat competition, and they're all losing money because they're always trying to undercut one another to sell a product. So they may have limits. They say, you know what, we're booked up. We don't need any more meat or poultry vendors. And you also want to choose carefully if you're a vendor to these farmers markets, because not all farmers markets have the same cost of doing business. It's not like I, as a rancher or a poultry farmer, get to walk up to that farmer's market and say, I want to sell products at your farmer's market. I'll be there this Saturday. Make space for me. It doesn't work that way. So even the participation costs may vary. If you do sell red meat at a farmer's market, and if you're a farmer's market manager and you have people that want to sell red meat, just remember that has got to come from an inspected slaughter and carcass breakdown facility. If you're going to sell it by the cut, it has to be inspected meat. Well, if you're going to sell it at all through the farmer's market, it's got to be inspected. And then the vendor himself or herself has to have a food establishment or retail meat sales permit, and they're subject to inspection to make sure that they're doing everything properly, including that their coolers and refrigeration of that meat meets all the specs and regulatory requirements. Same for poultry. It either has to come from a USDA inspected slaughter plant or one that USDA said and has given an exemption to. And TDA does not inspect or certify poultry processors operating under exemption. USDA handles that. So that is true. And once again, can't say it enough. Most vendors don't think about this. Most ranchers and farmers don't think about this when they decide they want to sell at a farmer's market. But for food products, and meat, poultry, or food products, you still have to collect and remit sales tax on those sales. So that's a lot that we've gone through in about 45 minutes. I'll do my best to answer any questions, although my answer may be it depends, depending on your question.
All right. Well, thank you, Rodney. That's great information. Appreciate that. And I know there's a bunch of questions here in the chat box, so been some efforts to try to respond to some of those. I'm trying to get to the top of my list here. I had one question, you may have already addressed it. My internet went out about 10 or 15 minutes after you started. So unfortunately, I will not be able to have the recording prior to when I log back in. But there's one question here in the chat box. Can you label your meat all natural?
All natural is a very generic claim, and it definitely, if it goes through, you can call it that. You can even use all natural in your name, your business name, if you want. Once we get to organic, certified free range, things like that, those are ones that are that require USDA approval. So you can't use those. Something as basic as all natural. Local, if you can say where it's finished, pastured, grain finished, grass fed, Angus, anything like that. Now we're talking about something that has to be verifiable, and you're going to have to get USDA to approve that if you put it on your label. It's paperwork is what it is. It's paperwork to do that. And if you're going to do that, basically what happens is a USDA inspector has to see your label and approve it. And you just have to submit it. So if you're going to sell that meat by the cut, then first thing you'll do is the plant that's going to do the slaughter and processing of your livestock, they have a USDA inspector. So talk to the plant manager and the inspector and say, I want to get this certification, and that's your first step. The inspector can tell you what you need to do, or you can go online and you'll find the information. The Center for Profitable Ag has a great resource document that kind of walks you through a lot of these things. If you want to make a lot of the claims, they tell you which links to click on to get the right information. That'll help too.
Thanks, Rodney. Appreciate that. So there's a question here about what if meat's marketed not for human consumption, such as for dog food? And I have put a link in the chat box to the publication that we developed a little while back on general license and labeling guidelines for marketing pet food and pet treats as animal feed in Tennessee. So maybe that's a good place for you to look at there for questions about marketing meat that's for pets.
Now, I will say, if you go down that road, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011 has changed some of the rules and requirements for pet food. So they don't even call things, they don't even call it animal feed anymore. It's animal food, and this has been an ongoing thing, especially in the meat side, because USDA oversees meat and FDA oversees all the non-meat. But FDA is in charge of the Food Safety Modernization Act rules, and one of those rules is food safety rules for the production of animal food, and it requires that animal food meet the same sanitation standards as human food. So here we are. Like I said, it's the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011. Like most things that come out of Congress, it's a 2,000-page bill that says we'll figure out the details later. So here we are 11 years later, and they're still trying to figure out the final versions of some of these rules. And just be aware of that as it relates to any meat or poultry products that you're turning into pet products.
All right, absolutely, very good. Okay, I'm looking through the chat here, trying to see if there's anything that haven't covered.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So the 100 bird or the 20, what was it, or the 2,000, 20,000? I can't remember what you said. I'm sorry.
1,000 and 20,000.
Okay, so it's 1,000 or 20,000, and that is only if you sell from your farm.
The 1,000 is. The 1,000 is me selling directly from my farm to the people that are direct consumers to me. Now, if I want to sell through a farmer's market or anywhere else, then I could go after the 20,000 bird limit and the exemption rules for that. And you know, once again, it's one of those things of it would take a day to explain it, and we're trying to squeeze all this into an hour. So I just kind of hit the high points of that one. But USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service would have to give you a certification that says your facility meets all the sanitary standards. So this is not a case of where you're just taking the chickens behind the barn and killing them out there on the grass or a concrete slab in the wide open and we'll rinse them off with a water hose. This is, you're talking about sanitary standards for slaughtering 20,000 birds. And USDA, TDA has a link from their website for that USDA exemption, and it gives you the link to the application if you want to start going down that road, kind of see what's required.
If no one else does, I also have a question. So if I understand correctly, your understanding of the insurance required, if I'm not processing anything, I'm just either selling basically steers or live birds, the actual general liability policy should be adequate. Is that correct? Or I've been a little unclear of how that applies if you're selling steers and having them being picked up from the slaughterhouse, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you're selling the live animal, and once again, that's the custom exempt loophole.
Right.
You're selling the live animal. You are not you're not touching the meat. You're not selling meat, and all the paperwork and records you have says you're selling live animals, and that general farm thing will work. General farm policy will work. Now, I saw a couple things come up about labels. You know, the things you put on your cards. That's your business card. USDA doesn't care what you put on your business card. They care what you put on the label of the product. That's what we're talking about here, the label of the product. I saw another one pop up a second ago. Let's see. Oh, the 1,000 bird exemption. I saw this one kind of red flags went off everywhere. Online farm website sales. No, the 1,000 bird is for people that come to you and pick it up. If you are shipping birds, and people are buying them online, you're shipping them to them, that is not the same thing as on farm. That is going to require you to be inspection or inspection, going for the 20,000. That 1,000 bird exemption is for people that come pick it up, because like it said, it's only you distributing it. If you're selling birds and you can't just put them in a box with a bunch of dry ice and ship them off to somebody who purchased it online. That's totally different. We've moved way beyond the exemption level, and you're trying to operate the same way as anybody else that sells inspected poultry in the market. And you know, if they happen to be across the state line in Kentucky, then you've moved outside that 1,000 bird exemption, because now we're talking outside the state. So the whole point is that bird goes directly from you to the consumer. There are no intermediaries handling this product. So that's It's very different. Online farm sales is totally different from that 1,000 bird exemption rule. Yeah, I saw one pop up, said the 20,000 bird limit should have some kind of documentation. Yes, so here's the deal. USDA is, what USDA is saying is we're not gonna have an inspector there. For USDA inspected plant, you have an inspector there for every time an animal is killed. No animal is slaughtered without that inspector being present. What they're saying for that 20,000 bird or less operation is we're not gonna have somebody there watching bird by bird to see the slaughters. But we are looking over your shoulder and checking everything you do, and we're going to request every record to show what you did, when you did it, every single bird that was killed, what day you killed them, how many you sold, all of that. And they will come check your facilities and make sure that sanitation, everything is up to specs. Hal, were there any other ones from earlier on that that you want to go through? I know there's quite a few that popped up.
Yeah, trying to get back to some of those. There were some questions about sales tax and what kind of rate to charge. You referenced a publication that we have written about that. The rate for most items in Tennessee is 7% for the state rate, but for unprepared foods, it's 4%. So if you're selling your meat or your poultry products, the state rate is going to be 4%, and then you're going to add your local rate on top of that. And that local rate varies from one county or city to another, but it varies from 1% to 2.75%. That would be added to that state rate of 4%. Let's see, there's some other questions here. I know we have Patricia Hart on the call too. Patricia's with TDA, and she may want to jump in with a comment or two as well. You're welcome to unmute yourself, Patricia, if you'd like to, and comment on any of this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pepper. I'm happy to be on the call today and answer any questions people have. Something that came up in the comments section and a question we get through our office a lot involves the terms retail exempt and custom exempt. One thing I try to say to explain those terms is that when it says exempt, that is exempt from USDA inspection. So retail exempt is a retail butcher shop or a grocery store with a meat department. That type of cutting is exempt from USDA inspection. It does require a Tennessee retail food store license and inspection. And this can get a little confusing because a lot of our new processors coming online, they are going for several streams of income. They may be custom processing for some customers. They may have USDA coming in 1 or 2 days a week for harvests. And then they might have a fresh meat case out front in a little country store. And there are 3 different types of licenses in play at that point. And it can become a little bit confusing. And the best suggestion I can give is to give our office a call. I'm going to put my phone number in the chat box. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a call. Because I work with manufactured foods, so I work with the custom slaughter folks. And then we actually have a retail food coordinator who works with retail stores. But in our office, we all work together as a team. So if you have questions, let us know and we'll do everything we can to help find you the answer.
Thank you very much. That will be very helpful for folks to have that contact information in the chat so they can give you a call. There's some good folks to work with. So someone asked in the chat, can I still buy chicks to raise under this exemption, or do I have to hatch my own? The answer there is no, you don't have to hatch your own eggs there. You can purchase those chickens and then raise them. They'll be considered your raised poultry and eligible for the exemptions that Rodney mentioned. There was a question about if I slaughter those birds under the 20,000 bird exemption, what does the label need to say? That's covered in our publication on managing risks of on-farm poultry processing. And I have put that link in the chat as well. So you can go there and see exactly what's got to be on the label. Or Rodney, you may have some information on that you want to share.
No, I think your publication will work very well. And the nice thing about it is your publication has some names attached to it that they can contact if they got more detailed questions. So there's somebody local that they can visit with.
Okay, all right, good. I'm seeing if I can quickly pull that up just to try to address that question about labeling. It may take me a minute or two here to find that. Let's see.
Like Tennessee Center for Profitable Ag has a publication just on labeling that covers a lot of these issues, especially as it answers a bunch of the questions about, well, what if I want to put this? What if I want to call my meat this? Grain finished, pasture finished, grass fed, organic, certified Angus, whatever. Then it kind of walks through what you do and do not have to have reviewed by USDA.
Right. So you want to have on that poultry label, you want to have your name, your address, a statement that says exempt Public Law 90-492, as well as the safe handling instructions. And TDA requires the product to be labeled with the net weight and sold by the net weight. That's for the poultry exemptions that we were talking about. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this was addressed earlier. I'm doing two things at once, so I apologize.
Sure.
So say if we're doing beef jerkies or Slim Jims and we add teriyaki, anything other than salt, then it's considered a prepared food and we have to do the additional taxes on it.
Okay, so when I was talking about sales tax, I was talking about, so if you sell your meat product and you've not added anything to it, no spices, then if it was from your raised animal or bird, then you are not required to charge sales tax on that product. But once you start adding something other than salt, water, sugar, pectin, or preservatives, like, for instance, a spice, now all of a sudden it is subject to the sales tax rules. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, great. Okay, we got any other questions for Rodney?
Yep, sorry, I'm a talker. Okay,
Yeah,
so so And again, I don't go to lunch until 1, so I'm doing a few things at once, so I do apologize. So for the exemptions, there's 1,000, a 20,000 that we were looking at. If we wanted to process them on farm, we just on the label have to say exempt from, and then include all that, the verbiage that you stated earlier, Mr. Howell.
That's right. That's right. You would want that on your label. And I want to try to respond to another question I see here about that, is where would be the best place to start the 1,000 or 20,000 exemption application process? Unfortunately, there really is not an easy answer to that, except this. Tennessee allows you to operate under one of those exemptions that Rodney mentioned, and you don't have to go anywhere to ask for a permit to do that or an authorization to do it. There's only, you can do that. TDA does not expect you to come and register with them. USDA does not require you to come and register with them. The only regulatory agency that does expect you to check with them is TDEC, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And they're concerned about the proper disposal of waste and wastewater. And so you are required to check with TDEC and let them know what you're planning to do and ask them what requirements they may have with respect to needing a septic tank or they just want to make sure that things are done safely and sanitarily and that no bodies of water are adversely impacted. So you are required to check with TDEC and find out what their rules and requirements are before you start slaughtering and processing poultry on your farm under one of the exemptions. But they are the only regulatory agency that you're required to check with when you start that process. And I'm continuing to look through the chat here to make sure that hopefully we have answered your questions.
Can you explain the difference in the 1,000 versus the 20,000? That's what I was trying to catch earlier, and I just was getting the two confused on what the difference is and the requirements between the two.
I can tell you the basic intent of the 1,000 is things that you do. The 1,000 is really for what you do on your farm. And it is meant to be direct from you to the consumer. Now, if you want to go beyond that and you want to start moving product through farmers markets and you want to get beyond where you're not saying I'm selling a lot. The 1,000 is I'm selling you a live bird, but I'm handing you a carcass. I mean, that's basically the intent of it. When you get to the 20,000 limit, that's saying I'm selling you poultry, not chickens, not live birds. I'm selling you poultry. And that's where you start seeing the labeling come in. It's got to have your name, your address, the exempt from the public law and safe handling conditions. So it is, the 20 is meant to be that intermediary step between I'm slaughtering, you bought a few birds from me and I just killed them for you on the farm, to I want to sell birds at the farmer's market and everywhere else, but I don't want to have to go through the time, trouble, and expense of having to meet USDA slaughter standards, because there's not a lot of small poultry slaughter facilities around. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a very complex. I mean, there's reasons you have programs where you spend a day or two going through these rules and regs, because it's very complex. And so I'm trying to kind of boil it down to the basics of it.
Yeah, it's always been hard for me to really differentiate a lot of difference between that 1,000 and 20,000 bird exemption, because USDA doesn't have a labeling requirement for that 1,000 bird exemption, but it's still a really good idea to include all that information on a label and put it on there. even if you're under that 1,000 bird limit. And of course, you're going to want to keep good records to show, how many you sold in case you're checked, to show that you were below that 1,000 threshold or that you're not above the 20,000. So I see a question in the chat. Is the farmer's market held liable for vendors not having the individual permits they need as vendors? If somebody wanted to sue a vendor at a farmer's market and they felt like they could get money out of the farmer's market as well, they're going to sue the farmer's market too. So, it does behoove the farmer's market, the manager of that market, to make sure that vendors are properly permitted and licensed.
One of the common statements made, and we've done day-long programs where all we do is talk about food product liability insurance for vendors selling retail, food service, elsewhere. One of the things that always comes up in this area is if there ever is a problem, if somebody's going to sue, just wait your turn. You're next. They'll sue everybody. It'll be the vendor. It'll be the farmer's market. It'll be the grocery store. It'll be you as the vendor. Everybody waits their turn because they're all gonna be involved in the lawsuit at some point or another. So yeah, it hits everybody eventually. It's very rare that somebody just out of the entire marketing chain goes, I pick you. I think this problem is just you and you alone. If it's something that happens in Walmart, somebody gets sick in Walmart, they'll sue Walmart. They'll sue the manufacturer. And if the manufacturer contracted with a trucking company, they'll probably sue the trucking company that took it from the manufacturer to Walmart. So just kind of expect if it happens at one, it's going to happen to more than one.
Good. I think we're about going to have to wrap this up. I know that some of us have some other obligations here shortly. I'm going to have to call into the webinar. I really apologize for that, but I've got another meeting that I have to attend. There was a question that I wanted to, I can find it here. Well, maybe we already covered it. The Tennessee Ag Law repeal. I know we covered that, I think, in yesterday's presentation. There have been some major changes in the Tennessee and Ag Law, the egg law, as far as what egg producers can sell. Those changes were recently made, and I'm scrambling here to try to find a resource on that I can put into the chat.
Can I talk about eggs real quick, Hal?
Please do. That'd be great.
All right. So if you have less than 3,000 laying hens, which is a whole lot of chickens, in Tennessee, remembering the 3 C's, the letter C, 3 of them is gonna help you out. So your eggs, in order to sell them, they have to be clean. So they have to be washed, cleaned eggs. They have to be cold. So they have to be after they are harvested and or gathered and washed, they have to be stored at 41 degrees or below. And they have to be in a new, properly labeled container. So if the 3 C's are covered, you can sell your eggs direct to consumer. You can also sell them to food service establishments or markets to resell. So the 3 C's is the easiest way. There is a great publication that Center for Profitable Agriculture has out, but if you follow the 3 C's, you're going to be all set.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, so I found the question that I was looking for about processing. It was if the birds are processed at a USDA facility, Can you sell those outside of the state? And yes, you can. Can't go across state lines to market birds that are processed under one of those exemptions. Okay.
Hey, can I jump in real quick? So we're really close to the Alabama state line, but if somebody comes to our farm and buys a bird, that's still okay.
Yes. Because they came to you. Yeah, as long as they're coming to your farm to get it, then that's not a problem. You just can't carry it into Alabama and deliver it to them under the exemptions.
Well, the
Absolutely.
slides emailed out.
Yes, I will be sending the slides out, and I'm going to put a link in the chat. I found the publication that Patricia was mentioning about egg sales in Tennessee, the new publication here. So you have that link with the latest rules about egg regulations, egg sales. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. I appreciate that great information that you shared with us, Rodney. I hope you'll join us again tomorrow when we'll hear from Redderly Clay, who owns and operates Wynn's Four Quarters Farm in Blackfoot, Idaho. And Redderly is going to show a model that she developed to identify and track costs and explain how to use it in setting your prices. I hope all of you have a great afternoon, and thanks again for being with us today.
Best of luck to everyone. Thank you very much. Thanks, Hal.
Thank you.